What if I told you that this was the best movie ever? I'd be a liar. So let's get on with this. I'm here, I'm ready, and I'm on a mission to review A Nightmare on Elm Street, the classic horror film. But why exactly is this film a classic? Is it because of the amazing performances from its young actors? The riveting dialogue? Johnny Depp? The bacon-faced child murderer? I'm sure you all know what this movie's about, but just in case you don't, so there's this guy and he's really funny and he's really jolly and he wears this nice sweater and he decides to help a bunch of teens bring their dreams to life. But for today, we're going to be analyzing the interpretation that some weird people have of this movie, which is that the sweater guy is killing the teens in their dreams as a revenge for their parents burning him alive. I like my interpretation better. So the movie opens with a dream sequence that for some reason is being shown in a smaller rectangle than the screen. I felt the need to point that out because I don't know why. We are then introduced to Freddy Krueger and non-main character girl. She is introduced in this movie as if she is the main character, but then she gets murdered and thrown around a room, and we go on to follow Nancy, who's the real protagonist. It's a little strange to introduce a character like this to us and have us follow her and then abruptly shift and begin to follow her friend, but it works in a horror movie like this because you don't expect her to die, and it makes everyone feel expendable. I've seen this or something similar happen multiple times in other horror movies. It seems to be the genre it can work best in. The only problem is that this girl is a much worse actress than this girl, and her hair keeps moving on its own between cuts. It's alive. I can see it. So we follow Nancy as she tries to go on with her normal life after her friend's murder, but she quickly learns that she can't dream or else she winds up in a dream world where Freddy Krueger can kill her. Throughout this film, we get multiple dream sequences that are filled with atmosphere, and we also get instances of great minimalistic horror. For example, in one scene, Nancy is at a hospital where she's being monitored in her sleep. This scene is creepy because all we can see is Nancy reacting to a horror that we can't see, and when she wakes up with cuts in Freddy's hat, we instantly expand upon the relation between Freddy and the real physical world. This is also a great setup for later when the mother reveals she knows who Freddy Krueger is. She goes on to explain how she and a bunch of other parents burnt him alive because he didn't go to jail after murdering multiple children in the neighborhood. This adds a whole new dynamic to Freddy's character because now what he is doing can be seen as revenge. I like what this is saying about giving into our emotional reactionary nature as humans. Freddy, when he was alive, was a child murdering monster, or at least we are led to believe that. But when he managed to escape incarceration, the parents took justice into their own hands and did to Freddy what they thought he deserved. Their decision to kill Freddy was purely emotional, and it wasn't like killing Freddy would bring anyone back. They gave into a darker emotional side that all humans have, and because of this, Freddy is now trying to get revenge on them by killing their teenagers. Now, this movie is one of the most iconic horror films ever made. Pretty much everyone's at least heard of it or knows who Freddy Krueger is. But that doesn't mean that it's really a great story. It's more of a really well executed premise. That premise being a guy who can kill you in your freaking dreams. Freddy Krueger is one of the best horror villain slashers on screen because he taps into something that all humans experience: dreams. And it's because of this that he instantly creates an interesting fear dynamic where someone is literally fighting to stay alive by staying awake. The scariest part is that eventually you have to sleep, so confronting Freddy is inevitable, and this gives the film a sense of urgency because Nancy has to find a way to stop Freddy before she can sleep. This is a similar kind of fear that the movie Jaws utilizes, where it makes you afraid to go into the water. This movie makes you afraid to go to sleep. There's also a little bit of a meta thing going on where Freddy in his dream world can pretty much do what he wants and pop up randomly anywhere, the same way characters like Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees do in their films, but with no explanation there. In this film, it's almost as if Freddy has slasher teleportation as a superpower. The lore that this film creates around Freddy is what's really grabbing at your attention and carries the film. The areas where this movie falls short are actually the same areas that a lot of horror movies tend to be lacking in. The characters are just not fleshed out besides habitual tendencies, like Rod, who is incapable of greeting people without scaring them, and Glenn, who always decides to fall asleep when people specifically ask him not to. Literally on the 3 occasions where Rod meets up with his friends, he intentionally scares them. And Nancy specifically asks Glenn to simply not fall asleep no matter what, twice! And both times, he isn't capable of compelling himself to stay awake. Worst boyfriend ever. None of these people seem to have much personality, but at least Nancy is proactive enough to come up with a plan to stop Freddy. Unfortunately, this ending climax is where a lot of things stop making sense and people start being dumb. Really dumb. The plan is for Nancy to grab Freddy in her dream and have someone wake her up so she can pull Freddy into the real world so they can put a beat down on his face. She allows her mother to tuck her in bed, and then after her mother leaves, she gets out her secret coffee stash. Now I have a question. Did her mother not smell the pot of brewing coffee right next to her daughter's bed as she was tucking her in? I mean, it's right there. You would think she would notice. I don't know why I'm talking about this, and now I'm moving on. So she gets on the phone with Glenn and tells him to come over at 12. She also tells him not to fall asleep. Of course, we know how that turns out. Glenn is turned into human sauce by Freddy, and the police arrive at the scene of the crime. So after they start cleaning up Glenn, Nancy calls her father, who is among those police, and tells him to come wake her up in 20 minutes. Now he says he will, but he clearly is just saying what she wants to hear so she will go to sleep. And I find it hard to believe that she can't tell this just by the way he's talking. But she decides to trust him anyway. You know, go ahead. It's only your life. Who cares? I hope you die. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but Nancy is trapped in her house with her mother, who is drunk. While she was out of the house, her mother had the doors and windows barred. It's really impressive how fast she managed to get someone to come out to the house and do that. Wow. What efficient workers. Is it easy to find people that will bar your windows for you on such short notice? I just want to point out that Nancy's mother is an idiot for not believing her daughter about Freddy killing people in their dreams. She watched as her daughter struggled in her dream, woke up with cuts on her arm and had a hat in her hand, yet she still tries to trap her daughter in her house so she can get her to sleep. But anyways, Nancy sets up a bunch of really complicated traps in her room and then goes to sleep to take on Freddy. She wakes up to her alarm while grabbing Freddy, bringing him into the real world, and he continues to chase her. She then sets him on fire, and then we see the worst looking burning stunt double of all time, and during all this, Nancy's liar-faced father is just chilling across the street at the crime scene still.
Maybe I should go follow through with my promise and check on my daughter. She has been warning us about all this murder stuff and is the only remaining member of her 4 friends. Better not.
Eventually, Nancy manages to scream enough at this perceptive individual here to get him to go get her father. They come busting in, and then Freddy's burning corpse is missing, so they go to check on the mother, and Freddy has fried her and let the bed eat her corpse. These two don't really seem to care, and Nancy's father just goes downstairs to continue on with his day. And if you really listen, you can hear an officer ask him if everything is okay. And he says, I don't know. Really? Your wife just died, and you think there's a possibility everything is alright. You just watched a man on fire disappear and the bed absorb your wife's corpse, and you think there's a chance that at the end of the day, things might be good. Your worst fears have been confirmed, and you don't seem worried at all. Hakuna Matata. Then all of a sudden, Freddy comes back to kill Nancy's face. Now hold on, people, because things are about to not make sense. Nancy starts talking about how she figured out his secret weakness. She says that he isn't alive, he's just a dream. But she pretty much already knew this. Nothing really has changed. So because she has this supposedly newfound knowledge, Freddy just phases right through her and disappears. I know Glenn gives his speech to Nancy about how if you turn your back on a monster in your dream, you take away its power and its energy and it disappears. But I don't know why Nancy would think this would actually work in a dream, and I don't know why Nancy would actually think that just saying these things out loud means that she actually believes them, that she actually feels them. She's just saying she doesn't believe in Freddy, but she seems to still believe that he is there. It seems like she just kind of took a random guess at what Freddy's weakness was, and then it happened to be right. So then everything is back to normal, and we see Nancy and her friends getting ready to drive off, and then it turns out that this is all still a dream and everybody dies, including the balloon person. So I guess that when Nancy took a wild guess at Freddy's weakness, she actually wasn't right after all. So actually, it all makes sense. It's just that Nancy decided to pretend she had discovered the secret to beating Freddy. So what we have learned from this thorough case study is that Nancy just likes to claim she knows stuff she doesn't know. And when Freddy tried to kill Nancy and just faded away, was he just pretending because he wanted her to feel like she won so he could crush her dreams later? Why did Nancy demand Freddy give her mom and friends back? How does she even know he can do that? Did Khan have a hairstylist to style his hair into that space mullet? Why did Harry's face heal so quickly after it was blown up by a pumpkin bomb? Why in Jaws 4: The Revenge does Jaws not eat Jake after catching him in his mouth? Why does Jason Voorhees never look the same in any of the Friday the 13th movies? Now, I know it seems like I may hate this movie, but I just want to assure you that's not the case. I think this movie deserves its legacy, but I do think that on a story level, there isn't much to latch onto other than Freddy and his backstory. I will say the strongest aspect of this film has got to be the directing. Wes Craven does a great job of integrating the very atmospheric dream sequences into the film, and sometimes the effects look great and you wonder how they managed to pull them off, like when Tina is being thrown around the room by Freddy. I assume that they used wires there, but it looks so real and fluid and natural. Glenn's death is also great and maybe the most iconic death in the film. Other times the effects look like your drunk uncle in a costume store trying on the masks and falling over things while on fire. But oftentimes, bad effects add to the charm of old horror movies, so you get a pass! Yeah! Like I said earlier, the weak aspects of this film are the same weak aspects that you'll find in many other horror films made during and after this. At the time, it wasn't apparent that these shortcomings of horror films were really going to be a serious issue with the genre in decades to come. To this day, we still have horror films that have unique premises but lack character and story. The difference between Nightmare on Elm Street and these films is that Wes Craven did a great job with the visual execution of the premise. Wes Craven is actually a great director and has great imagination, and later on in the franchise, he would tell more idea and character-driven stories. Oftentimes, it feels like writers and directors just decide early in the creative process that their movie is just a horror movie or just an action movie. What this means is that they're not trying to make the best film they can. They're just trying to reach some arbitrary benchmark of quality that's been set by other movies in the genre. I don't think that Wes Craven was doing that here, but I do think that Nightmare may have been one of those films that helped to create that arbitrary benchmark of quality for what horror movies should be. It's not this movie's fault, it's just that people were able to strip movies like this down to a basic formula and then use that formula until we had seen it a million times. The ironic part is that this totally original movie has inspired other people to make generic horror movies lacking any vision. Imagine if George Miller, when making Mad Max Fury Road, had the mindset of, oh, it's just an action movie. It doesn't have to be anything profound, it doesn't have to be anything great, it's just an action movie. We would have gotten something similar to Furious 7. But because he said no, I'm gonna let this film be whatever it can be, it wound up with a Best Picture nomination. It may sound cliche, but it really does come down to vision. Even if your movie is struggling in one aspect, you can keep an audience invested by simply having a true artistic vision that creates some sort of emotional response from the audience, and that's what Nightmare on Elm Street does. This was a simple horror film that became a huge franchise that greatly impacted the future of the horror film genre. Like any other movie, if you take into account the historical context of the film, you can appreciate it to a greater degree. This is an original movie, this is an entertaining movie, this is a well-directed movie. This movie deserves its legacy, but this film is held back by the same shackles holding back the genre as a whole. I give A Nightmare on Elm Street a 3 out of 4.